Great. Everybody, welcome to CKAMAs. Tonight's guest has been so deeply impacted by mentors throughout her career. She decided to carve out some space in her day-to-day to play an active role in the lives of people she's never even met. Determined to transition into product design despite not making enough to even cover her rent early on in her career, she attended a program that would not only equip her with the necessary skills, but a network of mentors that would catalyze both her career prospects and her own personal growth. Now, she works for a technology company that literally builds software to help other companies coach their own employees and plays a pivotal role in the growth of many of Springboard's aspiring and incredibly talented designers. Please turn your cameras on, unmute yourselves, and help me in welcoming the woman who exemplifies the very ethos in which career karma is built upon, Leanne Kawahigashi. Totally just butchered that. But thank you for joining us tonight, Leanne.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here and see everyone. This is so exciting.
Yeah, I really love the fact that you not only are super appreciative of like the mentors in your own life, but you go a step beyond and intentionally make yourself an available resource for others. I'd love to start off with like your experience transitioning into product design and the role of the mentors in your own life. Do you mind sharing like what that was like and why it was so impactful for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So some background about me, how I got into product design. Ever since I was really young, I wanted to be a graphic designer, and I ended up pursuing that and really enjoying it. But once I got there, I was like, there's something missing. And at the time I was living in San Francisco, and I was like, I think I want to get into this tech thing that everyone else is into in the Bay Area. And I also have always loved like computers, apps, you name it, always been into that. So I ended up taking this program called White Space in the Bay Area, and it doesn't exist anymore, but it was just a classroom of like 6 to 8 of us, and we learned product design that way. It was kind of like an accelerator. And it was so fun. It was so hard. I made like no money, but I learned a ton. And from there, I made some friends, had great mentors that invested in me and truly believed in me when I didn't think I could actually succeed doing this. And then hopped into kind of the tech world at a couple different companies. And at each one, I gained a new mentor, which was really cool because that means the leadership there were investing in their employees and they really cared about getting you from point A to point B and pushing you there. And that really taught me the value of mentorship and inspired me to want to give that back to a community and help other people as well.
So what does that kind of look like in your own role at Springboard with you mentoring others?
Yeah, it's an absolute joy. So at Springboard, we have about a 30-minute call once a week with each student that you mentor. And really what that means for me is that I get 30 minutes face-to-face with them, but if they need more time to talk through something, I am more than happy to spend the extra half hour, whatever it might be, a couple emails a week. It doesn't matter to me as long as they feel like they're getting value out of it. So it's a really, really fun experience to get to chat with people with different backgrounds and really tailor the course to what they like and what their experience has been. Because not everyone learns the same way. So it's been an amazing experience.
For the people that are on this call tonight, I think that this is going to be a really great time for you all to go ahead and like unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you might have for Leanne. She's here as a resource for you all. She really enjoys like giving back, as you can tell. So please use this like next hour to ask her whatever questions that you have. We have the chat available as well. So if you all want to throw your questions in there, we'll keep an eye on that as well. But yeah, does anyone want to start off with a question? We'll start off with Vanessa. So you see how she has her blue hand up as she's using the raise hand feature in Zoom. And so if you all can use the raise hand feature as well, that'll help us just sift through the order in which people are asking their questions. So Vanessa, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Thanks so much for being here and for coming to answer all our questions. So Springboard is actually one of my #1 choices for boot camps for many reasons. It overall seems like a great program, and one thing that I really liked about Springboard in particular is when I went on Glassdoor, I saw reviews not only from students, but also from people that work there that are very happy to be working there. And I like the idea of people who are going to be teaching you and going to be working with you, being happy to work for that place. Is there something in particular that made you want to work at Springboard?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Vanessa. I love that you've done your research on it. It's so amazing. I have really enjoyed Springboard. I've actually was mentoring with a company that was not Springboard at the time, and I guess got acquired or kind of turned into Springboard. And in that time, I had to take a break just due to some life things, and I got super busy, couldn't invest in it. But I really loved the community that welcomed me back so well. And even though I kind of started with a company that wasn't quite Springboard at the time, and then ended up kind of rejoining as they had a different brand and had some different processes, it was just so smooth, and everyone was setting you up for success. So as a mentor, they had so many handouts and resources that we could read that just set you up to be a successful and a good mentor, rather than kind of leaving you out to dry, you know, go figure it out. Here's some mentees that hopefully you can help, right? So they even have like a Slack channel for mentors where we can ask questions ourselves, because there are some things that we're like, what's the best way to approach this? I don't always have the right answer. So sometimes we can crowdsource and kind of get that information, and it's so cool to talk to the other mentors, because everyone cares so much about the design community and just people in general that are interested in getting into design. I mean, I talk to mostly the design mentors, so that's all really I communicate with, but they've just been so helpful, and they invest so much in their mentees, which I think is huge, right? It's not just a 30 minutes a week, all right, goodbye. It's 30 minutes a week that we actually see each other. It's on the calendar, but everyone is so open to, hey, if you need something, just email me. We'll figure it out. You know, we'll work it out no matter what the time zone is. We want to help you succeed. Thanks for asking.
So, yeah. So I was also really interested when you kind of shared with me the role that your last director of design, or at least it was at a previous role, played for you, and kind of encouraged your thinking and removed like an imposter syndrome of sorts. Can you explain like what the importance of like having a mentor that can meet you where you're at is, and how people can take more of a proactive you know, part of that relationship to make it easier for their mentor to like help them out?
Yeah, definitely. So some context around this. At one of my previous roles, I had just an amazing director of design, and he kind of took me under his wing. He saw some kind of growth potential, something in me. I don't know. I look at my past designs and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know what you saw in me. But he invested in me as a person, which was huge, not just me as a designer. I didn't have great self-confidence, especially in the design world where a lot of things are visual and you always are getting critiqued. And so sometimes you just think, I'm not doing that well. And he was the one that really believed in me and even promoted me at times where I literally said, are you sure? Are you making the right decision? And he was like, yes, you don't see, you know, where you come from. And he removed a lot of that fear of I'm not good enough, because I think especially starting out, you feel like you're never good enough, but you have the taste of like, oh, I know that this looks good, but I can't quite get to that part of me, like what is going on, I'm not going to reach it. But really it's just that you have to believe in yourself a little bit more, and if there's someone there that can push you into continuing to believe in you and kind of meet you where you are in your career and life, like that's huge. So as like mentees seeking mentors, what's so helpful is just being open and honest. You know, like work is part of your life, so if there's something going on, like you can totally be open about that, because it's going to affect, you know, your performance, your work. And as long as someone knows that's going to fight for you, they can help you get to the position that you need to be in. Yeah, so open, honest, and just trust is so huge in like a relationship like that.
So how would you also, I guess, advise people to go about finding a mentor? Or I know that a lot of people kind of, they'll play more of a passive role and kind of maybe hope that it'll come along. But how do you intentionally like make room for that in your own life?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times for me, it's come through work, to be quite honest. But there have been times where I've had a friend of a friend of a friend who introduced me to someone, and I saw something in them. And I was like, I want to kind of be like them. Like they inspire me, or they're in a position at a company that I would like to be in one day. And really all that meant was I just started a conversation with them. My friend made a connection for me. I asked if they wanted to grab coffee. In this day and age, maybe a Zoom call. But it was just me asking, right? And there had been other people that I was like, oh, they seem really interesting. I would love for them to mentor me too, but it's a two-way street. Like some people don't have the capacity, and that's okay. But all it takes is like an email that says, hey, I would love to learn from you. And people find that so flattering. And sometimes it doesn't turn into a mentor relationship, and sometimes it's just a connection, and maybe they just email back and forth and give you some good advice. But the worst that can happen is they don't email you back. So to me, like, that's not a terrible thing.
So we also have a couple of questions in the chat, as well as some questions that were asked during the sign up. So I'll go ahead and start picking up some of those as well. I think, so Ruthie's asking how long, like what the process of getting assigned a mentor looks like at Springboard.
Yeah, so you should be assigned one the day that you are like officially starting the course. I usually have my call with someone like their first week, so whatever day that overlaps. It sounds like you've done the pre-work, right? So you maybe haven't started it officially, like the start date, maybe.
Is that to Ruthie in the chat?
Yeah.
Ruthie. So she says she guesses.
If anything, I would reach out to your student advisor, but they typically, at least in my experience, I'm matched with someone like right when they start the course, within the first week.
So there's also a couple of questions that just have to do with like UI and UX in general. Someone asks, what are some simple habits that people can implement into their daily lives just to facilitate breaking into UX or UI?
Yeah, this is gonna sound super basic, but use some apps. Get out there, and even if it's not your daily, you know, I don't know what people use every day, Facebook, go download something or look at Facebook and really think about everything that you're looking at. Could you long press on something on your phone? If you're on web, what does the hover state look like? So just like dialing into those things, you never really think about that. A really good exercise is log out of your, I'm gonna use Facebook for example, because I feel like everyone's on it, or email or whatever it might be. Log out of your account, and then when you log in, look at how many states there are just to log in. You could type in your username or email. You could type it in incorrectly, there's an error state. You could check the I forgot my password box or whatever, or the remember my password box, or there's probably a sign up somewhere. There's like a sign up with Gmail. You know, there's so many things. like take a look at that, purposely try to hit all the errors, and like realize, oh my goodness, there's so many states that I never even think about, right? There's the error states, the focus state. If I press tab, what happens? That's what I would suggest.
So I'm actually realizing that maybe some people on the chat actually don't even know what a product designer is. Do you mind giving your definition?
Yeah, totally. So it's super misleading. I feel like when I say product designers, people think I design like something physical, but it's software. So I think a product designer encompasses the UI, the UX, the research. What else is there? Those are kind of the main things. So I also focus on like the business perspective as a product designer. So not only is it the experience and the research that goes into the experience and the interface, but also what benefits can we make for the business? So almost an overlap with the product manager in some ways as well.
And so what would your role kind of look like in the whole product development cycle, I guess? You're working with developers and product managers, and like where do you kind of fit in that puzzle, and how does your day-to-day work look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a loaded question. So typically, I work super closely with product managers, and some companies don't have those, and sometimes that lands on the designer to do. I also work really closely with engineers, front end and back end. Front end ends up being like my best friend, and back end engineers usually want to fight me a little bit. I'm just kidding. But front end, they really usually enjoy design, so we get along pretty well, which is really fun. But yeah, it's kind of an overlap of so many things. So not only those areas, those are probably my primary areas, but there's also like customer success and account managers. Those are the people that talk to users every day. And so those are the people that you also want to befriend and make sure that they feel comfortable sharing some of the things that their users are saying. I always kind of think of it as like a trifecta between the product manager, the tech lead or engineer, or whatever it might be, and then designer, because there's so much overlap there. And it's not that, somebody owns a certain part, but it's like you work together in order to get that product out the door. My day-to-day. My day-to-day, it is so fun, so crazy, and it changes all the time. But a lot of times it's just a matter of sometimes it's calling users and having some conversations with users and understanding their problems and what they think they need versus what I think they need. Because sometimes users will want something and it's not necessarily what will work in terms of the business or the app, but there's a different solution. So that's part of it, collaborating a ton with stakeholders in the company, like CEOs, VPs. They love design stuff typically because they get to react to something that's physical, which is cool. And then working with engineers to understand what's possible. So I can try to get something through the door all day, but if it's not possible, it's not going to be built. So that's huge. And then also supporting them as they're building it, right? There's always going to be something that I forgot to add to a mock-up. It just always happens. And as long as I'm there to support them and be that resource, then I'm being helpful in that role. And then working with product managers to understand what's the next feature we need to work on, and are we solving the right problems? So there could be a problem that people have in the app, but if we're not solving it in the right way, then we're kind of failing. And then once we've shipped something, we also kind of work together, engineers, product managers, and designers, to understand the impact and to figure out, what was the measurement of success there? Did we actually succeed? How do we know when we've succeeded? Do we have metrics on that? And then keeping up with the feedback and making iterations.
Okay, so I think that Harrison last week actually had a lot of interest in Springboard itself. And I see that he's in this chat tonight. Harrison, did you want to ask any questions for Leanne? I know you were really excited last week, so I was just wondering if you wanted to go ahead and ask.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, how do you feel Springboard prepares us to become software engineers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I work primarily with the design track, product design track. However, I can imagine that they're very, very similar in terms of how they prepare designers for success and how they prepare engineers for success. So I might not be able to hit specifics, but I think what's really cool is that there's a lot of real world experience that goes into building out this curriculum. So there's things in the curriculum that actually happen in real life, and you'll get to kind of experience some of those things throughout the course. And then you'll also have a mentor that is a developer, and they have that, you know, real world experience as well that can kind of tell you, hey, this actually happens, or this part of the course is really important because you're faced with this every day. So you have that hands-on opportunity to connect with someone that does this all the time and that can be really honest with you, which I think is pretty cool.
So on Springboard's website, sorry, can I ask another question?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay, cool. So on Springboard's website, it says that you can get through the software engineering course within 9 months if you're doing 20 hours a week. And I was wondering, if I do 40 hours a week, if I treat this like a full-time job, then would I be able to get through it in 4.5 months?
I guess hypothetically, I'm not familiar enough with the software engineering course to know kind of the different projects and what might actually take longer to learn, as far as like practicing it every day versus practicing every day for a week versus a month or whatever that might be. So I don't know that I'm the best resource to answer that question, but I can definitely find out for you, or maybe, yeah, we can find out the answer for you.
Yeah, thanks. That'd be awesome. For the UI UX path, is it on a similar timetable?
Yeah, so there's a couple options, but yeah, most people do a kind of a 9 months option.
Okay. So
And
for that path, is it possible to do it in 4.5 months because it's self-paced, right?
it is self-paced. I think that's possible. It might not. I would say I encourage people to really deep dive and take their time. And I think there's some ways that you could rush through it a little bit faster and get done with it faster. Half the time is doable. I don't know if I would recommend it. There's just some practices that's really helpful to let it marinate for a little bit or revisit over the course of a few weeks rather than a course of a few days, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So on that, like, how do you, what is your best advice on helping us Springboard students retain all the information taught as best as we can? Because, you know, like there are some pros and cons to doing a self-paced program. And I think that one of them is that you can go as fast as you want, but another con to that is that you might not be taking as much care and time on certain things. So how do you know whether or not you are capable in a certain aspect?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so you're right. Self-paced programs can be challenging in the sense that you can go super fast, you can go super slow, and you're not sure if you're making the right decision at that time. For me, if it's setting in for you, it means that you are practicing this all the time. You're finding new ways to learn and grow. So you could learn something, but there's always going to be a way to learn something to another level, right? You could take it to a whole nother level. You could for instance, you can mock something up and it could look great, but to take it to another level, maybe that means you add an animation. So you learn how to animate. Then you want to take it to another level above that, then you maybe learn how to implement it in CSS and HTML. So there's always ways to up level that. And I think what's really helpful about being in a self-paced program is once you kind of feel like you're really getting the hang of it, it's kind of clicking, then start to push yourself. I would set the bar super high for yourself, right? So get to a place where you feel good about it and then continue to grow and get better, and use that time to to practice, right? Practice all the time, not just on your projects, but maybe like a personal project, a website, a freelance project, whatever it might be. There's always ways to improve that and to make sure that it kind of sticks with you. Because once you start applying it in different contexts, for example, you could do it in your Springboard project versus an actual real life freelance project. Once you can apply that same thing to both contexts, that's kind of when you start growing and realizing, okay, I'm getting this. So that's huge.
So there's also a couple of questions that I think we can couple up within the chat. So one of them has to do a little bit about the differences between front-end development and design. And then another person's asking, like, how hard would the transition be from like software engineering to design and vice versa?
Yeah, so front-end and design, I would say the difference is the designer usually makes the decisions of what happens when you click where and how you form the information, what are the titles, what lives where, right? So if you think of going to a settings page as the designer, you decide what, where your account settings are versus your password reset or whatever that might be. As a front-end developer, you'll work more on getting that UI kind of fleshed out in the app. So actually doing that HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, whatever they're using, and to match those designs. And a lot of times front-end developers, which I love, are really intuitive. And sometimes, they're like, this design, it makes sense, but when I put it in the app, it looks kind of funky. And they'll kind of come to you and say, hey, heads up, this seems kind of weird. You want to look at it, maybe suggest a solution. Like, that's awesome. I love when I work with front-end designers that are just excited about, hey, here's 2 solutions I came up with on the fly that's really possible and in scope. So that's kind of the relationship there. So they make it work. I make it static. They make it work. And then what was the other question?
Transitioning between both.
Oh, yes, thank you. So yeah, I think if you have an engineering background, if you're especially front end, transitioning to design, I wouldn't say it's easy, but you have an advantage. You have to think of a lot of the same things. For example, hover states, edge cases. There's definitely things to learn on the design side, but there's that advantage of, sure, you can design something and then you can hand it over to a developer and be able to speak their language, so to say, and know that, this thing's going to be really hard. So maybe we'll have a backup plan for something easier to get out the door faster. So that's really important. It's different for everyone if they like the design side, but I would say if you do have a front end, especially background, you have that advantage of knowing how things work and being able to utilize that in the design sense.
So let's also take like a step back to the beginning, right? What did that process look like when you were kind of transitioning, right? And actually, seeking these jobs. And yeah, let's start with there. Like, how did that look? And then how did your mentors kind of like help facilitate that, that move?
Yeah. So when I was looking for product design jobs, I was in the Bay Area. So luckily I had like a ton of tech companies that I was really excited about. Also a lot of startups that I had no idea what they did. I'm not going to say it was easy because it definitely wasn't. It was a marathon of trying to fix my portfolio and changing it like every day, updating my resume, trying to figure out, do resumes even matter? I don't know. And really the biggest part was making connections. So going to meetups, meeting friends of friends of friends that work at different companies, just hearing stories about people that were in the design world versus maybe like in sales that work with designers. So seeing all those different perspectives really helped me frame the type of company I was seeking and the type of work I wanted to do. Yeah, it was super interesting. So the mentors that I had at the time, one in particular, I would ask him so many dumb questions, but in reality, they were not dumb. So at the time I was like, this is so embarrassing. I don't want to ask this stuff. Like, how much should I get paid kind of question. And he was so willing to answer, not necessarily give me a number, but encourage me to think about things in a different way, like how to negotiate, how to meet resources to look at salaries, or to look at what people make in different states. So that was so huge. And to me, like, now I tell anyone, like, ask all the questions, please. Feel free to, because they're not dumb. At the time you might feel embarrassed or like, I should know this kind of thing, but that's why they're there. His name is Denny, great guy. And he introduced me to so many companies just informationally, like, not even, hey, here's a designer for you to work there, but like, hey, here's a designer. She just wants to learn about a role at your company, not even apply. Just like, can you talk to her, do something? And that was so huge. And he just supported me through a ton of applications, and how to even talk about myself on an interview, how to frame what I've done in case studies. It was super helpful.
So do you still, are you still mentored, or do you still find that time to be able to like fit that into your life, as well as, you know, being able to mentor others?
Yeah, so I feel like so many people have like given to me, and so I still keep in touch with those mentors, but now I'm trying to like give back to them, as they also mentor me. Like, I don't think they'll ever stop. Like, they're so wise, the people that I've met over time. But now it's like, hey, can I even just do something small, like treat you to coffee, or like, let's go get a drink or something and just talk about life, not even, hey, I have a problem, can you answer it for me? And now it's just conversational, and it's amazing. And sometimes I do, you know, go to them. I've recently talked to a couple of them and said like, hey, the world's ending. I don't know what's going on with jobs and all of this stuff. Like, what do you do in this situation? And we just talk about it. And it's so interesting to have someone that's so senior in a design position kind of reassure me, like, it'll be okay. Don't worry. Look where you started. You know, even if things happen, it's fine. And so it's just been amazing to have them like pour into me, even just from a design standpoint, but now it's just like a life standpoint, if that makes sense, which is cool.
And Christy's also asking I think a really good question here too. So in that kind of like initial, I guess, phone call, when you're kind of getting connected to your potential mentees, what do you kind of look for? And what do you look when you what are you looking to accomplish with each of these like sessions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I'm initially talking to someone, kind of getting to know them, what I like to know is their background. I like to understand where they came from. If, you know, you came from maybe like a medical space versus anthropology, like, we're going to approach things maybe a little bit differently, and maybe we can use that knowledge to leverage even more knowledge in this new space. So I love learning about background, kind of where they came from. I also, this is going to be really random, I really like to know what you do when you're stressed out, and how we can get you to become less stressed. So why I ask that, or why I'm always curious about that, is because if I am aware, like, maybe when you're really stressed out, you get really quiet, then maybe I can identify that at some later time. And then I can also say, hey, you know, like, why don't you take a break? And maybe I know, you know, what helps you relax a little bit, or I can recommend something. So I'm just more aware of that, because like, that happens, it's life. You're not always going to be super happy, and that's okay. But if we can like be honest and open, like, that's totally fine. I'm not going to get mad. All I want to do is like help you succeed. So that's huge. I just love getting to know people, because I think mentoring is not a one size fits all. It's a, how can I tailor it to your needs, your likes? If you really want to learn, you know, this part of the course, you're really excited about that, we'll dive into that. We'll get into it. I'll really push you in there, and that's fine. So I love getting to kind of just understand what you're wanting to get out of the course, just so I can support you in that way.
Also, is there anything that you kind of really appreciate about how Springboard uniquely like perceives mentoring, or kind of emphasizes it in a certain way?
Yeah, you know, what I love about that is the mentors aren't like, we don't work for Springboard full time. We have like other jobs, and we all come from crazy different backgrounds, which is so cool, because they are like, yo, we're matching you with someone that's done all this random stuff, and here's a real world experience. It's not like oh, I work for Springboard, so I'm going to say all this stuff that they taught me to say. It's like, I'm going to say stuff that I learned. So they really encourage, you know, honesty and just investing in people, which I love, and even just connecting people, right? So like I talk to the other mentors on Slack sometimes, whether it's a question or just giving advice if somebody has a question. And it's been so helpful, and they even check in on you, right? So they're like, hey, schedule a call with this other, you know, person on our staff, and we'll just chit chat to see what's going well, what's not going well. And they're always open to feedback. And what's helpful about that is sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think, you know, I had this issue, but I don't know how to approach this, whatever problem it might be. And they're always open to helping you, you know, like take it step by step. We'll talk to you. It's totally fine. So it's super cool.
And I also, I think I've read somewhere, I don't know if I was just perusing the Springboard site earlier, but there's actually, like, you guys talk amongst each other, like with the mentors talking amongst each other, right? How does that like help you on your role with mentoring others?
Yeah, so they have like happy hours for mentors, which is fun. They also just have Slack where you can talk about whatever, random design stuff. And what I've really learned is there's no like one way to mentor, right? I think I've said that before. And so I learned so many techniques that other people have for mentoring, especially people abroad or in different time zones. And it's really shaped how I've like learned to mentor other people and the techniques that they use. So I could think, you know, one way is the easiest and most efficient way for me to mentor people, but then I hear another story and I'm like, oh yes, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? And you can kind of utilize that. So it's just so fun because you're continuously learning about design and then mentoring itself and all of this stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, it kind of plays into the whole like idea of, you know, design thinking and like what you kind of do in like a multidisciplinary field. You're kind of like bouncing ideas off of another, and it's always better to have like that diversity within whatever group that you're working in, because you know have ideas in equals ideas out, so you just create such like much more valuable types of interactions with the people that you mentor on a day-to-day basis. So that's really awesome. I think Gamira has a really great question here, and she's asking, is mentoring more technical, professional, personal, or like emotional?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's definitely a mix, and I know that's not just a normal answer, but it's a mix of all of those things. I think it probably leans more on personal, and I think that's part of my personality is I just enjoy getting to know people. If you've ever taken like Strengths Finder, I'm like a relator up there. I like getting to know you and continuing like the relationship and deepening that. So it's huge for me. For other people, they might not be, you know, as interested in deepening that relationship, but like keeping it as a mentor-mentee relationship. I'm like, let's be friends. Let's all be friends. It's totally fine. And other people don't want that, and that's okay. So for me, it's like definitely personal. Because I want to tailor the experience to you as a person. I don't want to force you to learn in a way that you don't learn. I don't think that's helpful. And I also, as a mentor, I think it's so important to not just teach, but to like coach and help you learn on your own, instead of like me ever barking, you know, an answer to someone that they won't learn from that, right? They're going to learn from how can we get them from point A to point B, just coaching them and having that breakthrough at some point. And then there's also that technical side, right? There needs to be some sort of technical, especially for design, there's this like technical like skill set side that if you're gonna help someone grow, maybe you should also be familiar with that topic as well. So that is definitely part of it. But I think I grow the most when I can kind of connect with the person and be super real with them, and build that relationship that way.
And she has a follow-up to that too. So do you recommend kind of taking a personality test, or what do you feel about that?
You can if you want. Some companies will require you to take one when you join. That's why I do mine. It's definitely fun. Like I love knowing my strengths, and even if things aren't in your strengths, they're not necessarily weaknesses, which is a good thing to remember. I really like it because then I start to identify like some things that I'm doing. I'm like, oh, I'm doing that because I'm a relator or whatever it might be, or maybe my strategy skills aren't in the top 5 because all my top 5 are like relational. I just like people apparently. And so maybe that's like, that means like I want to connect with people that are really strong in strategy just to like level up some of those strengths. I don't mean you have to take those tests at all. But like I said, I only did that because my employer asked me to and asked all of us to, and it's been really beneficial. So definitely something cool to look into.
Yeah, and I also recommend doing so just because it's going to be helpful when you enter any sort of endeavor where you have to work with other people, right? Like understanding like where your strengths and weaknesses are, and kind of finding like a good match for that is always going to be like helpful. So it's just good to kind of have a certain level of self-awareness because you can always propel yourself a little further than people that aren't as self-aware. So just to keep that in mind. So I think Jason asks, what's kind of like your students' favorite things about Springboard?
Yeah, so I've had a few mentees say that they really enjoy that they have these different resources. So not only do they have a mentor who is a professional in the space that they're trying to learn in. So in the case of my mentees, they have a design mentor, but they also have a student advisor. They also have a career coach, and then they have, I think, their own like Slack channels where they can talk to other students and bounce ideas off them. So what's really cool about that is I can give career advice, and that's totally fine. But then there's actually a career coach that has, you know, that more professional background that's able to give concrete advice, you know, about maybe certain careers versus others. I can only give advice of things that I've experienced. So I love that they have that different perspective. And I always like want to learn from the different career coaches and stuff. They also have that student advisor, like I said. So if they're, you know, maybe taking longer than expected on a certain part of the course, they can talk to their student advisor and they might advise them to maybe pause the course for a little bit. But they have that extra resource. So even if, you know, if I'm not available to connect them or something like that, they are always welcome to reach out to their student advisor and their career coach.
Also, when you're kind of, I guess is the word mentee, no, mentoring, yeah, mentoring your mentees, are you kind of noticing any sort of interesting patterns or things that like Springboard kind of, you know, enables them to do more than, you know, regular people?
Yeah, definitely. So there's always this like, I love this part. This is like one of my favorite parts, is seeing the breakthrough moment of like, aha, this is interesting. And what I love that Springboard does is that they set them up in all these different projects. And sometimes it's like, you know, students are like, why am I doing this? I feel like it's taking too much time, because it's just part of a course you're learning. And I love that Springboard kind of circles everything back. So they're like, here's 3 projects that you've done in the past couple units. Now we're going to use all 3 things that you learned in all those projects to do one big project. So it's always been so cool to see that like aha moment of like, now I get it. I understand why I just read 3 articles about balance. And then they utilize it. So that's the coolest part, right? You can read about it all you want and never actually put it into action. But when you do put it into action, you're kind of learning it, and it's like setting in even more, which is phenomenal.
And do you kind of like further push that onto them, or like what is your role in kind of their development of that design type of like muscle building?
Yeah, so I'm meeting with them weekly, so it could mean that they're like reading some articles one week and the next week they're actually designing. And for me, what helps or how I help is to kind of walk them through it, right? Work with them and understand, you know, what are you liking about this? What are you not liking so much about this? How can we push you in a direction where you feel like you're going to grow and learn from this technique? So I really enjoy using like real world experiences. So just telling them like, hey, this actually happened at work the other day. Like, I promise you it's going to happen. And typically that's kind of like the aha factor of like, oh, that's why this is kind of important, where I'm actually going to use this. So I enjoy kind of like that coaching part. That gets you to start thinking like a little bit more about, oh, okay, connect the dots. And then once they're connected, that's like my favorite part, right? That breakthrough, which is really fun to see.
I'm also kind of interested to see what kind of things that like the mentors in your life have instilled on you that you've actually went ahead and like essentially like stole like an artist, right? And applied it to the lives of all the people that you're kind of mentoring now.
Oh, so much. I've stolen so much, you guys. I have had some great mentors and they've been so knowledgeable that I just wish I could be like them exactly. So I just copy them. One of them had this breakthrough. It's called like a breakthrough model or something. So you ask a series of questions to get you from this version of thinking to this other version of thinking. And one of those ways to do that is to ask why 5 times. So I've definitely stolen that. And it's not just, you know, here's an answer, why, here's an answer, why. It's like, here's an answer. Okay, well, why do you feel that way? Okay, well, why is, and you kind of form the questions and it doesn't seem like the super annoying, like little kid asking why 10 times or whatever, 5 times. But it's really interesting because you can start it with something as simple as like, I don't want to eat Chinese food tonight. And you can end it with, oh, I actually want to eat Chinese food, but I should maybe get something healthier because that's the real reason why I didn't want to eat Chinese food. So it's like this breakthrough of like, you start with, you know, this project's really frustrating. And then once you get to kind of that 5th question, you're really learning what is actually frustrating about it. Is it maybe you're super stressed out about other things and that's actually making this project frustrating? So I love that. And I've stolen that. I've stolen many other things. So that's like the biggest thing.
Gumira is really crushing it with these questions. I really like this one. What have your students taught you?
Oh my goodness, so much. They have, I talked about this in the beginning, which was I felt like I wasn't good enough as a designer. And then when I started mentoring, I was like, oh my gosh, am I not a good mentor either? And the things they've taught me have been like, really just calling me out and like, hey, you know, I really liked when you did this, or it would really help if you could help me in this way. And that's been so helpful for me to grow as a mentor and to kind of meet them where they are. Because like I'm learning every single day how to be a better coach to people. And that's so huge to me. They've also taught me just different ways to look at things. I think whenever you think of a problem long enough, you kind of look in one direction. You're like, I'm just going to go this way, tunnel vision. And then sometimes they'll come in from left field and you're like, what? Oh, I never even thought of that. So I absolutely love the different perspective that kind of fresh eyes bring to the table, which is so cool because you get into this mode, right? That you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you get this fresh perspective and it's just like encouraging to get to see that.
I think that Jared, are you still on here? He might have left. He had his hand up. But okay, let's see here. Igioma. That's an interesting name. I like that name.
Oh, it's Idioma. I know you've been struggling with it.
Igioma. Do you mind?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you mind asking your question?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll ask my question. So I guess you mentioned a little bit earlier about transitioning from a software dev role to design. I guess, do you see similarities in terms of transitioning from QA to design?
Oh, absolutely. I think QA is a huge part of a design process. I work so closely with our QA engineers to identify, you know, those little edge cases. There's so much that they catch and that I forget about. And that's that attention to detail and the understanding of how something can be solved very quickly or a problem that you see often. That'll really help you in the design space. So if you are transitioning from QA to design, you have a huge advantage. You have that attention to detail. You have kind of that intuitive knowledge of how something should probably work. I think that it may not be easy for everyone. I don't think that it's a blanket statement to say, oh yeah, you're transitioning from this, that, super easy. No, but it is possible. And I think there's definitely an advantage to that.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, Jared's back. Jared, do you want to ask your questions? Jared? I'll give him a quick
There it
second.
is. There it is. There it is.
There it is.
Hit the button to forget it. Don't worry about it. Okay. Hi, Leanne.
Hi.
Let me turn on face actually so you can see. Oh gosh, come on. Hold on. Now we can talk. Question I had was when it comes like with something like the extra with JavaScript languages like React or some and Express and all those, are those just all personal preference? And have you ever had anyone who either, I'm not sure, working with you, you were training or working in the company, yet you actually had to tell, you kind of wanted to say like, hey, is this for you really, or is this something that you truly are passionate about?
Yeah, that is a great question. The first one about React and all that good stuff, the different languages. In my experience, it's just been the company wanted to move from one thing to another, or the company required something. So that's why I've learned some of them, or friends have learned them. A big trend, at least in my experience, has been like everyone's moving to React, like huge thing in a lot of startup world. So a lot of my friends are, if they don't know React, they're starting to learn it just for that sake. But other than that, personal preference. If you enjoy something over another thing, that's fine too. If you can learn many things, that's also helpful. I'm also not a developer, so I might not be the best person to answer that, but that has been my experience. Your second question, yes. So that is one of the harder things. And luckily, I haven't had to sit down and say like, you shouldn't be doing this, but rather like, let's reevaluate your passions. How can we make that align with maybe something in the product design world, or even just tech in general? So one of my mentees that was doing a design course, we actually talked about it, and I was like, hey, everything you're describing and some of the things that you really love when you feel that sense of flow where time just passes and you don't realize it, is when you're doing product management things. So road mapping, or even writing JIRA tickets, theming, big stories, that kind of stuff, strategy. And he was like, oh, really? I didn't even realize it. And he actually transitioned to a full-time product management role. And I thought that was amazing. I also had another mentee who is a UX writer now, and was actually joined the course to be a UI designer, and UX designer. And he excelled in writing. And so I talked to him, I was like, hey, there are parts of this that you really thrive in. And perhaps like you might want to look into some of these job descriptions, see if they fit. And he was like, oh, I didn't realize I could just be a UX writer. So yeah, I've had tons of people kind of pivot, and it's just about looking at your strengths, where you actually like what you like working in, because you could be really good at one thing but not like it, right? So how do we kind of align that, like find your zone of genius, as some people call it, and excel. So it's been a fun time for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I actually really love that question in particular, just because it's been, it kind of hits home a little bit too. So I actually started off with mechanical engineering and kind of made my own sorts of pivots. But it's also important to understand that as time passes, you grow and you change, just like the world around you grows and changes, right? And so just like how the future of like jobs is going to be radically different than it is today, you might also like change what your passions are, or what your goals and your priorities and what your values are. So it's good to have those moments where you kind of just pause, you take kind of like an inventory of like where you're at and reflect on those things, and make sure that you're still moving in the right direction. Because sometimes people have this goal and they forget that they also, transform as time goes on, and they're still chasing this thing that, worked for them, 15 years ago, but no longer is the same. So very interesting. It looks like we're running out of time here. So to close off, before I ask my last question, Leanne, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. I think I was in the invite. Then I can send it in the chat. My website is currently under construction, but you're welcome to go peruse. And then I think that's probably the most interesting platforms. If you want to look at what I'm cooking, I have an Instagram. But
Oh,
I'll
wow.
keep, I mean, if you're really interested, you can look at that. But yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat with any of you if you have questions or just want some feedback or whatever it might be. I love doing that.
Awesome. So this last question is kind of meant for people that are on this call to not only just take the advice that you've so graciously given us, but actually implement it. So what is one thing that people can do this week to move them closer to their goal of breaking into tech?
Yeah, great question. I've been marinating in this, and I was going to say, make your way to finding a mentor, but we kind of covered that earlier. So I'm going to fall back and say, read some articles, but also think about some companies that you admire. Maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's not, and that's okay. You don't have to admire Facebook. Think about those and what things you admire about them. Find a couple companies out there. Feel free to reach out or talk to someone that works in a role that you are aspiring to be in. So if you're looking to be a product designer, maybe reach out to some product designers for an informational interview and just a coffee or a Zoom coffee, virtual coffee, because they're willing to talk to people that are interested in the field. And like I said earlier, the worst thing that can happen is they just don't answer you, and that's okay. Some of the best conversations I ever had was to just reach out to people on LinkedIn in positions that I was hoping to be in one day, and they answered me, and it was phenomenal. I actually talked to Soleo, who was one of the first Facebook, I mean, okay guys, I'm not obsessed with Facebook, I know I've said that, but he's like one of the first Facebook designers. He invented the like button for Facebook, and I just emailed him, and he was like, oh yeah, let's meet up. So go find a couple of people that you want to talk to and roles that you want to learn about, and just learn, talk to them, reach out.
That is incredible advice and super tactical. So you all understand the steps of doing so, right? You search something up that you have some sort of interest in, you do your research, and then you reach out to these people. Now we do have workshops that, actually we have a workshop going on right now that David Harris, Ruben's brother, is actually teaching you these skills on how to do this cold networking. So if you're interested and you want a little bit more information on how you tactically actually execute, definitely join that event. So I would love to hear all of you guys, who you're reaching out to, what kind of companies you're interested in. Please post in discussions. I'll keep an eye on that. You can, find me definitely as a resource. Any questions that you have, I'll definitely try my best to answer all of these things. Hopefully Leanne can jump in the conversation as well. But yeah, I've learned so much, just like Leanne has said. When I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do moving forward, I did the exact same thing. I just reached out to people and just asked them, hey, what does it look like to work doing what you're doing? And as I talked to them, I kind of was trying to map out whether or not that sounded good to me. And I think that it's really important to go ahead and probe. And a part of product designing is literally just prototyping. And so this is a form of prototyping. You don't have to jump completely off the ship. You don't have to burn the ships at the shore. You can just send a little probe, your little, what is the Apollo 11, right? And just see what's out there, see if it vibes with you, and move forward if it's something that you get excited about. So awesome advice. And Leanne, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Everyone, thank Leanne for spending some time with us tonight. Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all for
Thank
asking
you.
questions.
All right. So that will be, that concludes tonight's event. Again, thank you all so much for spending this time investing in yourselves. If you want to continue this train, like I said, we have another job search masterclass going on right now. Jump into there, ask your questions, see how you can reach out to people. And Leanne, thank you one last time. And for everyone else, I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.
See you later.